Hello, this is Matt Janucki, and you're listening to Inside Men's Mental Health, brought to you by Psych Sessions. Here we explore this thing called masculinity and its impact on men's mental health, relationships, and communities. We'll learn together through conversations with thought leaders, innovators, and industry experts. Our conversations will also help us understand how these experts became interested in men's mental health and the ways their journeys have made them who they are today. In this episode, I spoke with Dr. Krista Fisher, who's a young men's health research fellow with the Movember Institute of Men's Health. Krista has done world-leading research on men's anxiety, which we discussed in Season 1. More recently, she's been doing research on men's engagement with the internet, and she's the first author on the recently published Movember report, Young Men's Health in a Digital World. Krista is now one of the world's leading experts in this area, and it was great to chat with her about the so-called manosphere and the effects of engaging with online content, particularly on young men. She had some suggestions for interventions and policies that could target some of the challenges in this area as well. Krista and I were together in Vancouver, British Columbia, working with the University of British Columbia's Men's Health Research Program. It was great to be in the room with Krista and talk about her work. Thanks and enjoy. So today on Inside Men's Mental Health, I'd like to introduce Dr. Krista Fisher, the Young Men's Health Research Fellow with the Movember Institute of Men's Health. You're also a member of the University of British Columbia's Men's Health Research Program and the Reducing Men's Health Suicide Research Excellence Cluster. Dr. Fisher, welcome today.
Hi, very excited to be here.
Yeah, good. I'm glad, you've helped me reach a milestone. You're the first return guest on the podcast. So congratulations.
What a pleasure that is.
Okay, yeah. And I think also last time we talked, you had just defended stuff for your PhD, your dissertation, and you weren't quite Dr. Fisher. So congrats on finishing your doctorate, right? That's exciting.
Yeah, thank you. So that makes the milestone of returning even more special.
Yeah, for real.
Thinking back to the first episode on anxiety, that was my PhD topic and something I'm still obviously involved in and researching, but it's always nice to kind of take a second to also shift focus a little bit, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm researching more online masculinity, social media stuff. So young men's anxiety absolutely still impacts that and is influential. But yeah, it's been a nice adjustment period stepping into the research fellow position at Movember and finding my feet there and diving into a whole new kind of space of work and literature and research.
Yeah, that was a great conversation that we had about men's anxiety. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you today about men in the online space and the work that you're doing there with Movember. I think probably people who are listening first may not know what Movember is. So maybe first you can say, what is it? What is Movember?
Yeah. My pleasure. Movember is more than just a mustache campaign. And I think sometimes people, if they do know about Movember, might just associate it with growing mustaches over the month of November.
Yeah.
But we are the biggest global men's health charity.
Okay.
And I recently kind of came on board and joined the team a year and a half ago. And that was at the time in which we announced and launched the Movember Institute of Men's Health.
Yeah.
So that was a $100 million commitment to building the Movember Institute, which is kind of a consortium of research, of advocacy and policy experts, and of program work that we do at Movember, with the idea of that being that it allows us to take new insights that we develop through research and then we gain from understanding changing phenomenon which impacts men's health, be able to connect in with policy and advocacy to take those insights straight to government, to making real world kind of implementable change. And then the idea is being able to, interconnect with our programs team means that we can build, test and scale community-based programs as well. So we're really speeding up the process of knowledge translation.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting as in there's not really anything else like that in the world, this research institute.
Yeah, definitely not.
You're trailblazing.
Men's health. Hey, it's certainly not me, but I'm very happy to be involved and, under the incredible leadership of Associate Professor Zach Seidler and Professor Simon Rice.
Yeah. With that kind of setting the stage of what Movember is, what I wanted to start to talk a little bit about is men's mental health and men's behavior online, and just wanted to kind of set the stage there. So So Movember just published a report called Young Men's Health in a Digital World with you at the helm of that report. So that's exciting. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about why this report matters so much right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Might help to I guess, set the scene for why Movember and myself kind of went into the online space.
Yeah.
You know, it's definitely something that has become an increasingly prevalent part of young people's worlds, young men's worlds especially. And when we look at and know about the mental health and, you know, more broadly physical health challenges that so many young men are experiencing and the trends that was taking place in terms of their health, we can't ignore the impact that social media is having on that.
Sure.
Young people spend on average 3 to 4 hours a day on social media.
Okay.
So, you know, to myself and many of the other team members at Movember, the big question was, well, what impact is it having? There was a lot of speculation, a lot of assumptions. So, yeah, that was really the direction that I wanted to take this research in. And the Young Men's Health in a Digital World report is a research report on insights gathered from a survey with over 3,000 young men in the UK, the US and Australia, where we, through the survey, asked them about the masculinity influences that they're following online. And we know that that is a very current phenomenon, the rise of not only masculinity influences, so that's people who create content about issues to do with men and masculinity. And yeah, that was the specific focus for us. So firstly, understanding how many young men are following these masculinity influences, and then really hearing from them their perspectives, their experiences of how watching these masculinity influences is shaping their health, their physical health, their mental health, as well as their relationships.
And I can't remember, you might have said this a second ago, Krista, I'm sorry. Did you say, when you say young men, like what that age range is?
Yeah, so it was 16 to 25.
16 to 25.
Yeah, for our specific research.
Okay. Yeah. So one thing that I'm wondering about, and you kind of related to this, we can talk a little bit more about, I heard you yesterday talk a little bit about this work, is how you looked at, you know, men who shared their TikToks with you and things like that. And I'm excited to hear about that a little bit more and how people learn from that. But you hear about this, like the manosphere, right? So
the buzzword.
Right. The content that guys are engaging with online. And it feels like this word that people use to refer to a lot of things and encapsulate this world that men are engaging with. I'm kind of wondering about, like, you're the expert here. Like, do you think that's a helpful word? Like, do you think that maybe there are other words that maybe are better in talking about the content that men engage with online? I'm curious in your opinion on that.
Yeah, great question. Very topical question as well. There is some debate at the moment. The expert in the room, I'm happy to kind of take that role, but there are experts in this space who will have different opinions on this.
That's fine.
But, you know, from our perspective, you mentioned the TikTok study. That is another research project that is running parallel to the survey that we undertook for Young Men's Health in a Digital World. But the TikTok study and research that we've been able to gather from young men sharing their TikTok feeds with us and all the videos that they've watched in the past month, the process of actually doing that research over the last year and all the learnings that we had taken from that research that's yet to be published, but obviously very happy to speak to it, has actually been really important in terms of changing or formulating my thoughts on the term the manosphere. We went into that research about a year ago where the academic base and scholarship base was very much focused on fringe online communities that really were what the term the manosphere was developed to describe and define. So they were self-identified members of sub-communities that advocated for ideologies about the importance of traditional ideas about masculinity. So men, kind of to summarize, men, the importance of men being rich, being ripped, being primary providers. And that was kind of the idea of what success looked like, or the only idea of what success looks like, all the way through to ideologies about male supremacy, about men's injustices in a number of ways being because of women or the rise of feminism or gender equality movements. Now, that term was developed about 10 years ago.
And the manosphere?
The manosphere,
okay.
yeah, that was where it first kind of started to pop up in research, in media. And over that time, the landscape of social media has completely changed. So what we're seeing now and what the TikTok study has been able to speak to is that this content which captures ideologies or narratives similar to some of the things that I talked about. So the importance of men being rich and ripped and how to kind of do that and achieve that very traditional model of masculinity in some ways, or the, I guess, questioning and provocation of whether feminism is actually harming men.
Yeah.
We're seeing that now in mainstream social media spaces, not just in
those fringe spaces.
More in TikTok and YouTube and Instagram.
Gotcha.
So not just in isolated membership-based communities anymore. So to me, I don't think that the term manosphere is reflective of the current moment that we're in when we're talking about the rise of this content now. It's, in my opinion, a different phenomenon where maybe it's more the mainstreaming of the manosphere, or another researcher at Deakin University has called it the neo-manosphere.
Okay.
So we're kind of in this space where we need something, a term that is able to capture the phenomenon of the rise of these ideologies, the rise of these influences, the rise of men and masculinity content now on mainstream social media spaces. But I don't think that the manosphere kind of fits, because it was used to define and describe a very different phenomenon than what we're seeing now.
So if I think I help you if I understand right, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think what I heard you say is like as the manosphere was initially described, it was kind of these kind of more fringy pockets in these spaces, like membership-based spaces of the internet. And that was more of the manosphere, versus when you say the mainstreaming of the manosphere, it is in places like TikTok, which are just used by lots of people. Like it's...
That's right.
Yeah.
And if we think about, so it's essentially like, it's that we need something to describe the phenomenon in terms of how it is currently in today's moment. And maybe that is like more talking about the evolution or change, but we're at risk of miscommunicating about something when someone might use the term manosphere, and what they're describing are those very isolated, self-identified groups where men openly ascribe to or agree with some of those ideologies. But we're also using the same term, the manosphere, to describe young men sitting there that we know are being pushed this content because of algorithms. So they're not actually kind of openly going out to find it, which may be the case in more self-identified communities, but they're opening their TikTok, and we know that this isn't research that we've done, but incredible researchers at UCL and others have looked at how quickly young male profiles that researchers have created, like dummy accounts, are pushed this kind of content. So misogynistic content that...
Like how quickly, Krista?
Like 30 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fast.
So, you know, that to me feels very different than the self-identified manosphere communities that may, in some people's opinions, be defined as radicalized groups already.
So thinking about the manosphere as in like maybe the neo-manosphere, kind of the new manosphere, the mainstream manosphere.
I think we can call it mainstream. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'll use that term.
For the purposes of today's conversation.
Yeah, we can define our terms. Yeah. What kinds of content then? I think you referred to it a little bit here, but maybe we can just make sure clear on that. What kinds of content are men engaging with in this mainstream manosphere?
So we know that when we've looked at the TikTok feeds of young men that I mentioned in a research study that we're doing where they've shared videos with us, the purpose of that research was to create a new framework for how we define and describe the actual themes or categories of the content that they're seeing that relates to men and masculinity, which, you know, is a little bit more reflective of the spectrum of content. So we know that issues to do with men and masculinity now in these mainstream manosphere spaces or mainstream manosphere content have molded to broader men's lifestyle and culture. So athletes, men's fashion, that's probably what we would call on-ramp content. So it's content which is specifically targeting young men because of things that they're interested in: gaming, athletes, men's fashion, men's grooming. We have a second content category, which is all about the importance of procuring masculine status and how to do that. So that's content that might advocate for the importance of men being entrepreneurs or successful in their jobs, having a particular stereotypical hyper-masculine physique and how to do that, might encourage or promote very traditional ideas about gender, not only for men, but also the types of partners that men should look for. So in relationships, in families, in workplaces, the roles that men should be living up to. And there's another kind of thematic theme here where there is this promotion of financial luxury kind of. So the Lamborghinis, the Rolexes, and that wealth is such a big part of masculine status. The last content category, which may be more closely associated with ideas that I guess were founded or can be linked back to fringe self-identified manosphere communities, is content which promotes hopelessness, worthlessness, content that we might see depicting self-harm or suicide, because from the messaging of the content, men's lives won't get better, that there is, you know, such an injustice facing them, and that society has kind of skewed so far away from addressing the needs and issues of men that there's no hope, or that if you don't look a certain way, if you don't fit a certain mold of masculine success, there's no hope for you in the dating market. There's no hope for you in terms of your mental health. We also have themes of content in that last category where there is very clear depictions of explicit misogyny or violence towards women and violence towards other men. So it's content which glorifies violence and the importance of power over other people. And we also have, which certainly has become more and more prominent, a rise of risky health-taking behaviours. So binge drinking, drug use, and steroid use as well.
So as you talk about that spectrum, I think that's how you framed that, right? That content.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, in some of the work that you looked at with your report, did you find any both risks, benefits, right, associated with engagement with the mainstream manosphere? I mean, I think certainly risks here, right? You've talked about some of those, right? Like what content is displayed around self-harm, misogyny, right? Some things like that. So for example, I was really impacted by some of the content that you showed yesterday. I have two daughters, right? I have a 13-year-old and 7-year-old daughter, and watched some of the things that, you know, are depicted on there. Just was really impacted by that of what's displayed and what men may be watching there. And feel free to speak to any other risks. But I guess I'm wondering, are there other benefits? I think sometimes what's discussed with maybe like in the on-ramp, right, part that you talked about, like could that help men, you know, like develop healthy behaviors, right? To like exercise, and, you know, you kind of hear that, like exercise, clean your room, you know, things like that. And is there anything that potentially you saw or looked at in some of this showed it could be healthy or beneficial for guys?
It's a great question. And I will get to answering the question, but I just want to say the description of the content categories and your reflection that it's likely linked to harms for men, that is an accurate assumption, I would say. But it's I think important to flag that we still don't have a causal association yet. That's something that we're hoping to do with the TikTok study.
Yeah.
But we haven't been able to accurately through research show that an increase of exposure to misogynistic content, self-harm and suicide content is causally linked to suicide or to violence towards women. I think that is a solid assumption, but just to flag that when we're not quite there yet. And the difficulty is often our ability to capture data longitudinally, and that this is still such an early space of research and an ever-changing space of research. So with the report, shifting back to Young Men's Health in a Digital World report, we were able to capture insights around the relationships between exposure to masculinity influences. So that masculinity influences who create content about men and masculinity, it's slightly different than the content categories that I described, but it's helpful to think about those content categories as things that masculinity influences likely cover. But same as the content existing on a spectrum, masculinity influences in this space also exist on a spectrum. So you might have a particular masculinity influencer who solely focuses on gym and exercise and encouraging certain routines or certain diet plans to the young men who are watching their content. And then you might have another influencer who is more in the podcasting space, for example, and might have conversations about politics or things like that. So if any listeners aren't familiar with this space, I just think that's probably a helpful flag.
That's great.
And with the report, what we were able to capture is from creating two groups in the 3,000 sample of young men who are regularly watching these masculinity influences, so one or more, relative or compared to young men who aren't watching these masculinity influences. Some really interesting trends around the benefits of consuming and regularly watching masculinity influences came out. Firstly, that young men watching masculinity influences were actually more optimistic about their personal circumstances and the social circumstances of young men over the next 5 years. And unfortunately, we weren't able to pull out or get granular detail on, is that because self-improvement kind of content is more likely to be associated with benefits relative to maybe some of the other content that we might see in this space, which is more like the explicit misogynistic content or the content which might kind of talk about the fact that for men, if you don't look a certain way, then things are over, and, you know, that sense of hopelessness and nihilism and all those kinds of things. That's something that we definitely want to do. But I would say, and I think that it's a safe assumption and a safe hypothesis, that there is absolutely merit to that self-improvement, self-optimization content. We've got insights from young men where in the survey we asked them about what do you like most about men and masculinity content online that you see. And a lot of the responses from that were, again, this is qualitative, so not quantitative in terms of the survey, but was that the self-improvement, self-optimization content helps me work out what's important in my life. It gives me very practical steps to implement, to chase my goals. And, you know, I think about that in terms of we don't yet know across a period of time, does that actually help them? Or is it just feeling like there is a pathway forward? I know the steps that I need to take. Is that enough to give you a sense of, oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm motivated. I'm feeling that drive and ambition and all of those kinds of things. So to clarify or to flag that we don't yet know, does it actually benefit them over the longer term? It's, I think, really important to think about what are they, like, what benefits are they getting even in the moment from just watching this? Because that maybe speaks to some of the things that they're lacking offline as well. That the fact that this content is made to be super engaging, to be really like motivating and to get you hyped up and things like that, you're not really going to have anything like that in the offline world. Maybe a coach talking to their players at halftime or something like that. But that is the feeling that you get when you watch these videos. And, you know, having spent enough time in these spaces watching the videos myself, I can really relate. You do get a really practical, kind of relationship with these influences and with this content.
I'm wondering too if you're able to learn anything, and then it's okay if you're like, no, because I can't remember, Krista, and so my apologies. Okay, the limits of my long-term memory. If you learned anything about these guys engaging with online masculinity influencers about their mental health, and so kind of what their mental health looked like, either related to the influencers or just kind of associated with that. Like, tell me a little bit about that. That's something you learned a bit about.
Yeah, we did. So again, with those two groups, the comparison between young men who are watching these masculinity influencers in comparison to those who weren't. Young men who were watching these masculinity influencers, even though they had high levels of optimism about their personal circumstances or social circumstances, they actually were faring worse in terms of their mental health. So there was a contradiction here between, guys who are watching these masculinity influencers versus those who don't, with those who do reporting high levels of optimism and hopefulness, but they were also, you know, struggling in terms of their mental health. Yeah, that's
interesting.
Yeah. So, you know, again, that tension, even though this was a cross-sectional piece of research, so it would be really interesting and will tell us a lot more when we can look at this over a period of time. But what that may speak to is the fact that in the moment or in the short term, it might make young men feel good, feel motivated, feel inspired, but actually in the longer term, it's not setting them up for any kind of improvements or substantial changes in terms of their mental health and well-being, that it may be more of a momentary benefit, a momentary hit, but maybe not actually have the kind of foundational change to their mental health and well-being that may seem like it is in the moment.
Okay. So that may be giving you a little bit of insight into that. Even though they report more optimism, maybe in the longer term, they're theoretically, maybe their mental health is not reaping the benefits of that optimism. They're showing some mental health struggles still.
Yeah. And it could also be, you know, that young men who are faring worse in terms of their mental health are more driven towards watching this type of content, that there's a real desire there potentially for something that's going to make them feel better, something that's going to tell them what to do. Yeah. So that's definitely a possibility. But yeah, the other side of it, and this would be where my assumption and my hypothesis is, that the higher the bar that young men set for themselves, which often is synonymous with the ideas of masculinity and what success looks like that's promoted in this space, means that you have further to fall when you aren't achieving that. Because what these masculinity influencers do is they tell you, you know, these are all the things you should be doing. These are the solutions. And those solutions are tied to things like action, agency, the importance of like hyper individuality, like taking control of your life and doing these 10 steps to kind of achieve the job that you want, to ask the girl out on a date. But when things don't change, when maybe the promises that these masculinity influencers are promoting don't actually translate and don't actualize, then the feelings of shame can absolutely rise, where it's, well, it's because of me or a personal failing that I wasn't able to do that. And this positive feedback loop then kind of arises from that.
Yeah, it makes me think of the kind of the treadmill metaphor, right? Like the higher and higher it goes, the harder and harder it is to stay on, right?
Yeah.
And the harder that fall is as these guys are moving farther and farther down.
Yeah. And, I think like when you ask me the question of is some of this content helpful, and the idea of self-improvement and self-optimization, hyper-individuality, I think a sense of agency and action over one's life is incredibly important.
Absolutely.
Like in terms of health and well-being and things like that. But equally important is taking care of yourself, and equally important is recovery. We know that with high-performance athletes, for example, you can't be running at that treadmill incline 100% of the time. And the recovery and being kind to yourself, that isn't going to get clicks and shares and comments in the way that maybe do 1,000 push-ups and, eat meat only every day for, 10 days or whatever it is. Yeah, that is more kind of enticing, engaging content. Yeah. Yeah,
it just makes me think of some of my male students that I've talked to that talk to me about the hustle culture, right? So it's just go do, right? There's no room for that recovery piece, right? Like it's just maximal self-optimization all the time.
Yeah. And we're living in a world where that is absolutely the case. So many, like we're more engaged and stimulated and, working hard and constantly on than ever before. But there is also a unique element to this where social media and the delivery of content on social media platforms like TikTok or YouTube is also go, because you watch a 10-second clip and you flip to the next. So there's also the delivery of those messages that I think is really important too. And, I sometimes get asked this question of, well, hasn't these ideas about male success or that go culture, hasn't that been around forever? Like, why is it now different? Or misogyny, for example. This has been an issue in our society forever. But, social media platforms and YouTube and TikTok particularly, I mentioned a little bit about the algorithms and the way that content's delivered. An important component to this too is the metrics of those videos that young men are exposed to. So with the ways that algorithms curate very particular content that is sensitized to the user, you also have the likes, the comments and the shares, numbers, metrics displayed. But you never see anyone else's algorithm, really. Like you're only ever consuming the content that's on your feed. So what that does is it really sways someone's perception in some ways. It keeps you very locked into a box where you might see 200,000 people have liked this video, for example, that might be, talking about the importance of men paying on a date and the things that men should do on a date to ensure that they're coming across as a high value man. But you're not ever getting the alternate side of that video or the alternate side of that advice. And young men are watching these videos and seeing 200,000 people or 100,000 people have commented and kind of agree with that messaging. So it really is distorting the kind of exposure to advice, to guidance on the things that are of most interest to young men, which is jobs, which is dating, which is money, which is exercise and, that identity formation.
Great. That's something I wanted to ask you a little bit about around algorithms and how that feeds content to men. And I wanted to go back to something you mentioned a minute ago. I thought maybe we blew by it a little bit too fast with, you talked about research that's been done with creating dummy accounts and how that moves content to these dummy accounts. And that's relevant to the conversation, right? And I think also that informed some of the reasons why you wanted to look at like active TikTok data, right? Where it wasn't dummy accounts, but actual user experience.
Yeah.
But maybe just talk a little bit about that dummy account research and how that moved content to men and why that matters. And I guess for me, why it's so I don't know, disturbing.
Yeah, absolutely. So before the TikTok study that we had done, or the genesis for the TikTok study, was that the bulk of research on algorithms and kind of mapping how quickly certain types of content was delivered, because algorithms and social media platforms are constantly changing. Researchers were obviously wanting to understand what types of content are young people seeing, how does the algorithm function, because the algorithm is sometimes called a black box. We still have very little understanding about how it's actually engineered, and the nature of algorithmic models is that they do take on a life of their own. They're taught by the delivery of content as well. So it's kind of like they're trained in real life. That's getting too technical into the engineering side of things, and way beyond my expertise. But researchers did set up accounts posing as a young man. You can select your age, and just looked at what kind of content am I pushed, like what type of content, without liking, without interacting.
Like a YouTube account or something?
Yeah. Okay. YouTube accounts, TikTok accounts.
Okay.
Just to get an idea of, what videos are young people seeing. And the only characteristics that the algorithm had to kind of go off was the age and gender of the user. So it speaks to just how much the algorithms deliver very stereotypical content that is tied to user characteristics, so that being age and gender. So if a researcher set up maybe a dummy account posing as an 18-year-old woman or a young woman, they're likely to get fed, and this is, beyond our field of men and masculinity and manosphere spaces.
It's good to have that contrast,
But we know that young women have, equally important issues in terms of their experiences on social media, and that they're pushed more diet-related content, pushed like these ideas about physical appearance and women being thin. So what I eat in a day, plastic surgery, cosmetic surgery, all those kinds of things. So these are very stereotypical issues that are associated with stereotypical traits associated with gender.
And does, based on the algorithm, it starts feeding the dummy account content X, and does the content evolve over time, or is it more about just because of the age and gender, the account gets X content, or does the content become more like something over time? I don't know if that's something that.
Yeah, no. I get what you mean. So
thank you. I'm glad. I'm trying to explain myself, and maybe you're tracking me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll answer and see if I've understood it correctly. But I think what was so interesting about researchers being able to show that within 30 seconds, if you're setting up a dummy account as a 18-year-old young boy, there's content that's pushed to you that is misogynistic or that has themes of drug use and self-harm and suicide. That was interesting because these researchers weren't doing anything other than watching videos and then showing how quickly it took to be pushed that kind of content without any interaction from the end of the user. But how algorithms function is that they go off the interactions of the user. So typically, and when it's not for the purposes of research, when it's actually for the purposes of just using social media for enjoyment, for entertainment, you would like, or you might watch videos for longer periods of time than you would another one. And you just flick through videos that you don't like, but videos that you do like, you're probably watching for longer periods of time. Or you can share a video with a friend or whoever, and the algorithm functions or changes based on those user interactions. So if you like content, you're probably more likely to get shown or fed videos similar to that. Yeah, or if you watch a video for a longer period of time, you're more likely to be shown videos like that. And, the algorithms are so sophisticated now that it also takes back-end data from what you might have looked up online, for example, or music that you might have listened to on Spotify. And then you see more and more of those videos. Honestly, it amazes me sometimes how I'll open TikTok, my normal TikTok account, and I'll see a video that is like kind of linking two things, like a album or something that I might have just listened to with a celebrity or an influencer or something that I just shared to a friend because she'd created a funny video or something. And
Sure.
I'm like, oh
Wow.
my God,
Yeah.
how, it's kind of crazy, really.
So the researchers were, I think what I hear you saying is they weren't, liking things or sharing things, right, that typically people would do. But you could imagine, right, if they were doing things like that, how quickly it could adapt and change and share certain content that would be tailored to you.
That's right. That's right. So what they wanted to show is like even without
that.
without that. And that was potentially, not potentially, that was a limitation of where the research base was at currently, where TikTok would respond to a report that kind of showed how quickly these videos can be pushed to a user account posing as a young person, to say that that isn't reflective of a typical user experience though. And so for us with the TikTok research study that we're doing currently, it was so important to collect data from young men's TikTok accounts, because that allows us to say, this is, real life young men.
Right.
These are the videos that they're watching. Because again, we can't talk about this phenomenon from an outside-in perspective of the manosphere or of men and masculinity content. That, is a limitation of the research base currently, is that so much of it is observational or looking at these communities and kind of analysing discourses and conversations and stuff. But the focus of our research and what I kind of prioritise across the program of work that I lead at Movember is, what do young men think about this? What do young men think about this content? What types of videos are young men seeing? So that we can actually get a much better understanding of how a typical young man is showing up on social media.
Just wondering a little bit about some of the things that you're thinking about and Movember's thinking about, of how we support men, how we maybe advocate for changes. It could be policy-wise in the online space. I don't know. What are some things that y'all are thinking about?
Yeah, big question, but absolutely so important to finish on this bent of like, what do we do? And the complex nature of this is right. It is, there are so many facets of this issue that is social media and young men and health, which means that we need a multi-pronged approach for solutions. There is work that we need to do to advocate for better regulation, for better policy around these social media platforms, holding these platforms to account. Even being able to hopefully put pressure on them to work with researchers to make research and accessing user data more possible. Because right now, what we're limited to is collecting data that young men have shared with us themselves, which has a number of challenges and barriers. So, it's holding big tech to account. It's encouraging collaboration in some ways between researchers and these big tech companies, where we can take the insights that we've got from a health perspective, for example, and hopefully work with product developers to ensure that the product that they're creating, which is, social media platforms or certain characteristics within these social platforms, like algorithms or chat messaging or something like that, if not promoting health, well-being and healthy relationships for young people, at least not causing harm. That should be the, bare minimum.
Ideally, right?
Yeah. And working with governments as well to help them inform and, construct policy around social media. Like Australia, for example, we're looking at introducing an age ban for young people. So that will...
An age ban for...
for social media. So young people under the age of 16 won't have access to social media as of December this year.
Oh, wow.
And that's different in the UK and in Canada and US. So it is, in terms of policy, definitely a changing landscape. But we need to work with governments to take the insights that we've got from research to them to help them kind of craft and shape how they show up politically to support young people. There is increasingly a part of solutions that need to be offline, I think, as well, like ensuring that young men are getting the support that they need from other friends, male peers, and everything in their lives, so that when they are encountering this content online, they either have a trusted person that they can go to maybe challenge some of the messaging or content that they may be exposed to, but also ensuring that the connections and relationships that they have offline are conducive to health and well-being and all those kinds of things, which may mean that some of the harmful narratives or harmful messaging wouldn't resonate as much as it might if there's a young guy who is particularly lost, particularly disenfranchised or struggling at school or in the workplace, and may make them more susceptible to these kinds of messaging and narratives. But there's also work that we need to do with young men directly. I think that's the most important work that we need to do, where we're helping and empowering them to use social media in a way that's promoting their health and well-being and not taking away from it. So, for example, showing them some of the insights that we've got through young men's health in a digital world. And we've done that a little bit since the launch of the report. We've had a lot of conversations with young men where I've talked to them through some of these results and asked them, how does that kind of compare to your own thoughts, your own experiences as one individual versus the 3,000 sample? And how do you think about using social media in a positive way? Do you think it is more positive or kind of detrimental to your health and well-being? And helping them reflect on those tensions maybe between it might make me feel good in the short term, it might make me feel more optimistic, for example, but actually I don't think it's helping me address these underlying mental health challenges. I am working out more than I have before, and maybe I have thought about using steroids or all those kinds of things. I think it's also bringing some of those research and insights to young men to ensure that we're helping them engage with and consume this type of content in a way that's actually going to help and not harm them, because it's not going away. Like, even with the bans being introduced, there's part of me and a number of other researchers would say this, that we're actually more worried about than the spaces that young people may go to online, that some of the fringe communities that I mentioned at the very start of this episode, where we initially kind of coined the term of the manosphere, that they may pop up, these unregulated fringe communities online again, and that, it may be even more challenging for us to be able to keep on top of those fringe communities, because young people, they're digital natives. I love that description.
Right. Yeah.
They know social media way more than we do. They've been brought up around it. So I think we need to take their experiences and perspectives seriously and ensure that any policy, any solutions, so those offline solutions that I mentioned, any interventions or resources that we may develop to upskill an individual young man around how to use social media in a way that's conducive to their health and well-being, they need to be co-developed with young men.
Yeah, I like that idea. Interesting idea of bringing the data, the insight to young men and helping them understand it, getting their feedback, having a conversation around it. And I'm sure you've gotten feedback on that. Of just wonder if all of them or many of them are aware of like that. Again, as you talked about the spectrum, like the on-ramp, and then kind of moving through that, where some of them might be aware of that, of what's happening, but some of them, may not be aware, right? Or they may not be aware of that's what's happening to their friend, right? And so just building awareness, I think, could be a huge piece of that. And then bringing them into the conversation just sounds really important.
Yeah, that's so bang on. It's about increasing awareness, but it's also about approaching this from a place of curiosity so that we can actually open up conversations and not shut them down. Because too often what happens is that we come at this, as caregivers or parents,
right,
or loved one in men's lives who aren't in these digital worlds, who have no understanding of them. And the risk we take with that is that we come at this from a very punitive kind of perspective where we're looking at everything as bad or only considering the very harmful kind of most extreme content categories and content themes that young people might see, but also maybe dismissing the very tangible benefits that it can have around, helping them, improve their own health as well and find community, find information on things that they may never have had access to otherwise. So, I think approaching this from a place of curiosity, from a place of openness is incredibly important.
Great. Well, this has been, I think that's a great place to wrap up the conversation. It's been so informative, like a double dose, like hearing you present yesterday on this. And
You've
then
had a lot of Krista.
Yeah, right. That's great. Kind of take a deeper dive today. And so it's been so great to just follow up with some questions. We'll make sure to link the Movember report so people can look at that. It's a great informative report with lots of great charts and insight. And so that is, anything else to direct people to that are interested in your work?
Yeah. Thank you, Matt, for having me. It's been a wonderful conversation. I would also maybe encourage any listeners who are interested in hearing more about the work that we're doing at Movember to go to the Movember Institute of Men's Health website. All of our outputs and the report that you mentioned will be there, but there's a lot of research that will be coming out soon, not only in the social media space, but also across all of the other programs of work that we're doing. So, Great.
This sounds like a great preview. We have things to look forward to.
Yeah. Third episode coming in soon. Yeah.
Okay, great. That sounds good. Well,
in the next 2 years.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. Okay. Love it. Well, thank you, Krista.
Right. Thanks, Matt.
Okay. Hi, everyone. This is Matt, just dropping in to say thanks for taking the time to listen to this episode of Inside Men's Mental Health. Do you have ideas for future episodes or feedback on current episodes? Please feel free to reach out to me at inside.mensmentalhealth@gmail.com. That's inside.mensmentalhealth@gmail.com. inside.mensmentalhealth@gmail.com. Take care, and again, thanks so much for listening.